My boss mocked me as deadweight. I quit and watched his company fall apart. It started like any other terrible Monday. My name's Daniel. I'm 31 years old, and this is the story of how my so-called small act of rebellion ended up sinking an entire company. The fluorescent lights above my cubicle buzzed like dying bees. The office smelled faintly of microwaved fish, and I sat staring at my monitor, pretending to care about an Excel sheet I could have filled out in my sleep. 5 years at Braxton Logistics. 5 years of quiet work, no recognition, and carrying projects on my back while middle managers took the credit. I wasn't important. At least, that's what they thought. Or so they thought. At 10 a.m. sharp, we all got summoned to the main conference room for a team alignment session, which, in corporate speak, means someone upstairs wants to feel powerful. There were about 40 of us crammed in there, plastic chairs scraping the floor, the weak smell of free bagels doing nothing to hide the tension. And there he was, Trent Barlow, our brand new CEO. A man who looked like he practiced motivational speeches in the mirror, complete with a spray tan, a too-tight navy blazer, and a $15,000 Rolex flashing like a distress beacon. He strutted up to the front of the room, mic in hand, yes, a microphone, like this was a TED Talk, and flashed his signature, insincere grin. "All right, team," he barked, pacing like a game show host. "Big change is coming. We're streamlining. We're innovating. We're cutting the dead weight." People chuckled nervously. I glanced around, already feeling that sinking, familiar dread. I kept my head down, hoping to blend into the cheap carpet pattern. That's when Trent spotted me. Like a shark catching a whiff of blood, he pointed directly at me, his smile widening cruelly. "Take Daniel here," he announced, voice booming through the speakers. My heart dropped. I froze. Trent turned to the crowd, gesturing at me like I was a prop in some twisted magic show. "This guy's been here. What, 5 years?" he said, sneering. 5 years in the same role. Same desk. Same paycheck. Laughter rippled through the room. Sharp. Nervous. Like a reflex they couldn't control. I stayed still, blinking at him, feeling every eye turn toward me. "He's what we call a legacy asset," Trent continued, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Means he's been here so long. Nobody even remembers why." More laughter. Louder this time. My stomach twisted. My ears burned. "And you know what happens to dead weight on a ship, right?" Trent said, his grin cutting wider. "You toss it overboard." The room exploded in laughter. I looked around. Some people looked away, a few looked guilty, but most were laughing. Laughing at me. The guy who trained half of them. The guy who stayed late when they wanted to leave early. The guy who saved their screw-ups more times than he could count. And Trent just kept going, like a school bully who'd found a weak kid in the cafeteria. "But hey," he added, pretending to soften. "Some people are just comfortable being average. And that's okay. We need people like that, too. Paperweights don't move, right?" My fist curled under the table. He winked at the crowd. "And who knows? Maybe Daniel's loyalty will come in handy when we need someone to fetch the coffee." More laughter. Applause. Even. I felt something cold and sharp rise in my chest, not anger. Not sadness. Clarity. Because right then, I understood. These people never respected me. And Trent? He never would. I stood up. The laughter stumbled, confused. I snapped toward me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out an envelope. My resignation, signed and dated 3 days ago, folded neatly like a loaded gun. I walked to the front of the room, every step slow and deliberate. Trent watched me, his grin slipping just a fraction. Without a word, I held out the envelope. He blinked at it, confused, as if it were a foreign object he didn't know how to touch. "What's this?" he asked, grabbing the mic again like it could shield him. "My resignation," I said, loud enough for the entire room to hear. Clear. Calm. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. A hush fell. You could hear the HVAC system humming in the ceiling. Someone coughed awkwardly. I smiled at Trent, really smiled this time. "And just so you're aware," I added, "I'm the one who built your invoicing systems, your vendor contracts database, your audit compliance protocols. I'm also the one who's been quietly fixing the errors your favorites couldn't figure out." Trent opened his mouth to say something, but I beat him to it. "Good luck without your dead weight," I said. Then I turned and walked out, past rows of stunned faces, not looking back. No applause this time. Just heavy, stunned silence. As I packed up my desk, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Matt, one of the senior account managers. "Holy sh**T. You broke Trent." I smiled at Trent, really smiled this time. "And just so you're aware," I added, my voice calm but carrying, "I'm formally giving my 2 weeks' notice, as per company policy." I laid the envelope neatly on the podium in front of him. "For the next 14 days, I'll be available to hand over my responsibilities. That is, assuming you realize what those responsibilities actually are. The room stayed frozen. Trent grabbed the envelope like it was radioactive, glaring at me, probably debating whether to explode now or later. And just a heads up, I added, stepping back, it's going to take a hell of a lot longer than 2 weeks to replace me. With that, I turned and walked out, still employed, technically, but no longer theirs. Not really. Not anymore. I didn't storm out that Monday. No dramatic exit. No flipping tables. I went back to my desk, logged into my computer, and spent the next few hours simply watching. Watching the cracks begin to spread. Because I had 2 weeks left, officially. 14 business days. And if they thought I was going to lift a single finger more than absolutely necessary, they were even dumber than I thought. The fun started the very next morning. At 8:04 a.m., my phone buzzed. Matt from Senior Accounts texted. "Hey man, client billing isn't syncing right. Can you fix it?" I leaned back in my chair, took a long sip of my coffee, and texted back. "Oh, that? I'm no longer authorized to make system changes without a manager's written request. Company policy. You'll want to email Trent." 3 hours later, Trent's voice echoed down the hallway, shouting behind the glass walls of his office. Poor Matt stood there, getting absolutely rained. Day 1. Billing chaos had begun. Day 2 was even better. Vendor invoices started bouncing back. Nobody had ever bothered to learn the payment authorization system I built. Why would they? Daniel always handled it. Daniel the deadweight. Now vendors were calling and emailing nonstop, threatening late fees, interest, and service suspensions. Around 2 in the afternoon, Christina from admin tiptoed up to my desk. "Hey, Daniel," she said, voice thin. Can you help me get into the purchasing database? It's locked, and Trent said you'd know how." I gave her my most innocent expression. "Oh, no," I said sweetly. "That's proprietary access. Only authorized personnel can grant permission. I'm just here to fulfill assigned tasks until my notice period ends." I smiled wider. Maybe Trent can help? Her face drained of color, and she practically ran away. Day 2. Vendors furious. Day 3 brought the real fire. Quarterly audit day. The external auditors showed up in their suits and stern expressions. Clipboards, laptops, little polite smiles that hid their hunger for blood. Guess who had always cleaned up the mess before the auditors arrived? Guess who made sure the inconsistencies never saw daylight? Not anymore. Around noon, one of the auditors came to my desk. "Excuse me, Daniel? Could you help us locate the Q2 reconciliations?" I smiled warmly. "Normally they'd be in the audit folder on the shared drive," I said. But I noticed my access was revoked after I submitted my resignation. Company policy, you know. He frowned, made a note, and walked away. 2 hours later, I heard the senior auditor's voice carrying across the conference room. "We're flagging this for secondary review." In audit language, that was a death sentence. Day 3, audit disaster. By day 5, the IT department was on life support. Nobody realized that the internal ticket system, customer issues, internal tech problems, onboarding accounts, was being manually routed by me. No automated system. No fancy AI. Just Daniel making it look easy. When I stopped managing it quietly behind the scenes, the whole thing crumbled. Tickets went unanswered. Critical issues got buried under pizza delivery complaints. The IT director, Marvin, went from mild-mannered to rage-sweaty in about 4 hours. At one point, I saw him march by my desk, muttering, "How the hell was this all running before?" I kept typing. Didn't even blink. Day 5, IT and meltdown. The weekend came. I slept like a baby. By Monday morning, the company was in freefall. New emergency meetings popped up on calendars. Every other email subject line screamed, "Urgent." And me? I didn't attend a single one. I answered only the basic emails. Fulfilled only direct, assigned tasks. Nothing more. I watched it happen, sipping my morning coffee like it was the most entertaining show I'd ever seen. By day 8, the whispers started. The entire office buzzed with gossip. Daniel was leaving. Daniel was the one who kept everything together. Daniel was the reason the walls hadn't fallen before. Even Trent must have heard it, because that afternoon he swaggered over to my desk with a smile so fake it hurt to look at. "Daniel," he said, voice just a little too loud. "Buddy, just wanted to check in. Everything good?" I looked up at him, slow and deliberate, and saw it. The fear. The realization dawning that maybe, just maybe, he had set the fire himself. "Good," I said calmly. "Really good." He shifted awkwardly, glancing around like he was searching for someone to rescue him. "Well, you know, if you need anything, we're here for you," he mumbled. I tilted my head thoughtfully. "Nope, I said, snapping the word like a rubber band. All good. Just finishing my notice. Wouldn't want to violate company policy. His mouth twitched. He slinked away without another word. Day 8. CEO cracking. The final nail didn't even come from me. It came from the clients. With billing broken, vendors furious, and the audit scandal growing uglier by the hour, the big clients started to leave. By day 10, 2 of the company's largest accounts pulled their contracts. Gone. Just like that. Someone printed out the termination letters and pinned them to the break room bulletin board like war trophies. Nobody dared take them down. Day 10, client exodus. Day 12 was haunting. People were cleaning out their desks in the middle of the day. Half the junior staff just stopped coming in altogether. Nobody even bothered to send HR emails. You could feel it, the slow, bitter collapse. The meetings got smaller. The lunches got quieter. The desperation got thicker. The break room fridge smelled like panic and old yogurt. I caught glimpses of Trent, hollow-eyed, pacing in his glass office like a man trying to outrun his own shadow. Almost, I felt sorry for him. But then I remembered the microphone in his hand and the laughter in the room. The feeling vanished. My last day was strangely peaceful. I handed in my laptop, my badge, my parking pass, signed the standard HR exit paperwork while they tried not to look too nervous. When they offered a last-minute stay bonus if I would extend my notice another 2 weeks, I smiled warmly and declined. No hard feelings, I said, and I meant it. I walked out the glass doors one final time. The sun was high, the air was clean, and my steps felt lighter than they had in years. The receptionist, the only decent one left, caught my eye as I passed. She gave a tiny, almost reverent nod. Good luck, she whispered. I smiled. I already had all the luck I needed. The real storm wasn't outside those glass doors. It was still brewing inside. When I woke up the first Monday after officially leaving Braxton Logistics, something strange happened. Nothing. No alarms. No panicked emails. No desperate voicemails. No frantic texts asking, "Can you just fix one more thing?" Just sunlight through my window and the sound of a quiet world that didn't need me to prop it up anymore. I made coffee, sat on my balcony, and scrolled lazily through the news. Then, just for fun, I pulled up LinkedIn. And there it was. The first post. Braxton Logistics seeks experienced financial operations consultant. Immediate hire. Urgent need. I almost spit out my coffee. Urgent need. Less than 3 days after I left. I scrolled a little more. The post had been up for 3 hours and already had 2 desperate edits. I clicked into the company page. Open positions, 12. Key leadership roles, for listed as interim. They were bleeding, and they knew it. By Wednesday, the phone call started. Unknown number. I let it ring. Then a text from a number I didn't recognize. Daniel, this is Dawn. Please call me when you can. We'd really like to talk. Dawn, the CFO who once barely acknowledged my existence unless he needed a spreadsheet cleaned up. The next day, an email. Subject, exciting opportunity. Let's discuss. From Trent Barlow. I opened it purely for the comedy. Daniel, we recognize the value you brought to Braxton and would love the chance to bring you back on a special consulting basis. Please name your terms. It ended with a smiley face emoji. A smiley face. The same man who publicly humiliated me now begging, using emojis like we were old friends. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the screen. I thought about all those early mornings, those late nights. About the birthday dinners I missed. The sick days I worked through. The loyalty I gave freely, thinking someday someone would notice. And when they finally noticed, it wasn't gratitude. It was fear. Friday afternoon, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Matt from Senior Accounts. One of the few decent guys left at Braxton. Hey, man, he said awkwardly when I picked up. Trent asked me to reach out. They really need you. I stayed silent. They'll offer you double, he rushed on. Full consulting rate. Remote. You can set your own hours. Anything you want, basically. I sipped my coffee. Sounds tempting, I said lightly. Matt let out a little relieved laugh. Yeah, man, they're freaking out. I imagined Trent sweating through his $1,000 suit, pacing, trying to come up with ways to spin this disaster to the board. Good. They're also, well, Trent's trying to spin it like it's just a temporary bump, Matt added, quieter. But honestly, half the department's interviewing elsewhere. The vendors are livid. The auditors are threatening penalties. It's bad, dude. I smiled. I figured. There was a long pause on the line. Finally, Matt said, "So, should I tell them you'll think about it?" I thought about it. I really did. About taking their money. Setting my own terms. Watching them squirm while pretending it was all just fine. But then I pictured myself logging back in, seeing those emails flood my inbox again, sitting through those meetings with fake smiles and fake apologies. And I realized something. I didn't want their money. I didn't want their desperation. I didn't want anything from them. Not anymore. I didn't need revenge. I already had freedom. No, I said simply. Tell Trent I'm not interested. Matt let out a slow breath. I figured, he said quietly. Good for you, man. Thanks, Matt, I said. Good luck. You too, he said. And I could hear it in his voice, the sound of someone realizing that maybe, just maybe, they needed to get out too. That night, I closed my laptop, tossed my phone into a drawer, and went out. No plans. No expectations. Just me, my jacket, and the open city. I ended up in a tiny little bookstore I used to love back in college. The kind that smelled like old paper and hope. I wandered the aisles aimlessly, letting my mind go quiet for the first time in what felt like years. In the back corner, next to a battered couch and a crooked lamp, there was a corkboard full of handwritten notes. Dreams. Wishes. Hopes. Start my own business. Finally take that trip to Ireland. Write the book I've been scared to write. And tucked into the corner, almost hidden behind an old flyer, one note in messy handwriting. Remember, you're allowed to choose yourself. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I pulled a pen out of my pocket and added one of my own. Never be the dead weight again. Not for anyone. I pinned it next to the first one. And then I left, stepping out into the night air, the cold crisp against my skin. Alive. Free. Ready for whatever came next. The Monday after I turned Braxton down, I woke up earlier than usual. No alarm. No noise. Just a feeling. A quiet, steady pull towards something new. I made coffee, sat by the window, and opened a blank page on my laptop. At the top, I typed 3 words. What comes next? Not out of fear. Not out of desperation. Out of possibility. For the first time in years, I wasn't trapped. I wasn't beholden to people who only saw me as useful when it suited them. I was free. By the end of that week, I had a plan. Nothing huge. No grand startup launch or billion-dollar dream. Just something simple. I picked up a few freelance gigs helping small businesses clean up their finance systems. Real people. Family-run places. Shops and cafes that couldn't afford giant consulting firms and actually valued the work being done. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't flashy. But it was mine. And weirdly enough, it paid better than Braxton ever did. Within 2 months, I had more work than I could handle. I picked my clients. Set my hours. Worked from sunny cafes or my own couch. Nobody pointed at me during meetings. Nobody called me deadweight. Nobody laughed when I walked into a room. And one night, sitting with my laptop open and a whiskey in hand, a notification popped up. Braxton Logistics. Breaking news. Mass resignations plague Braxton as CEO Trent Barlow steps down amid financial scandal. I smiled, quietly. Not with spite. Not even with satisfaction. Just peace. I closed the article without reading the rest. Because it didn't matter anymore. Their story wasn't mine. Not anymore. 6 months later, I was sitting at that same little bookstore where it all started, coffee in one hand, a pen in the other, staring at the corkboard again. Dozens more notes had been added. More dreams. More promises to themselves. And there was mine, still pinned up in the corner. Never be the dead weight again. Not for anyone. I thought about taking it down. But then I smiled. And I left it there. Because maybe someone else would need to see it, too. Maybe someone else was sitting at a desk somewhere right now, thinking they were invisible, thinking they were worthless. And maybe they needed a reminder. The people who call you dead weight are just terrified of what happens when you finally let go.